you Pacific Mornings with Will on 531 PI.
It is 8:35. You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. William Terite with you through until 9 a.m. this morning. Would love to hear from you. Pacific Mornings at pmn.co.nz or through our Facebook page, 531 PI, particularly on this next interview. Joining me for the final interview of the year is ACT Party leader David Seymour to reflect on the highlights, perhaps some lowlights, of his first full year in government. A very good morning to you, David.
Hey, good morning, William.
Hey, look, let's start with some highlights. I think there have been a number of wins for the ACT Party this year. Charter schools, cheaper school lunches. What do you think in terms of the year that has been for yourself and the ACT Party?
Well, I think, first of all, we got through it. We've done our first full year in government, and this has been the first time that a government's come in from the right and really made a lot of change. There's been a lot of times the National Party's been elected largely by themselves and basically kept close to what Labor had done. This time we've had a government that really has come in to shake things up because we believe New Zealand's in decline and we need to change direction. And I put that down to the fact it's the first time that you've had ACT actually at the centre of government at the cabinet table. So look, we're really proud of that. And you just look at the last week, electronic money management for welfare, rebalancing labour laws and personal grievances, rebalancing the Residential Tenancies Act so that people actually have some rights as landlords to be able to give notice. You look at charter schools getting open, just absolutely spectacular, so that kids who are disengaged in education have a chance. I could go on, but I better not. I feel like we've really had a totally disproportionate influence on this government from what the size of our party is, and I think that's probably why we've got a little bit of growth in the polls.
Certainly. Look, not to make this too much of a wishy-washy interview, but is there one particular point this year or policy or implementation that you're particularly proud of?
Look, I would go back to the charter schools. I mean, just last Thursday, I was at the old former site of St Stephen's. That's going to reopen as a charter school called Tipine, and it's one of many. I was there the previous week. We're opening one in the far north. That's for a group who run early childhood education. They're called Aotearoa, and their big achievement is that they've gained the trust of the community. They've got 4 early childhood centres with about 160 young children, almost all of them young Maori children, in a community where people don't often trust the government. So they're going to run a charter school because they do have people's trust. They can get people to come along and engage in education. And I think in terms of what we can do for the long-term future of New Zealand, it's all about getting knowledge transferred from one generation to the next. So that I think, if I was going to say anything, it's the charter schools is the big difference we're making here.
For sure. And look, just before we perhaps move on to some perceived lowlights, let's talk about in terms of there's this perception throughout media narrative this year that you are perhaps the man behind Luxon in terms of pulling the strings and getting the wins that you've been advocating for. What do you make of that kind of sentiment that's kind of been built throughout the year?
Well, I don't think it's about me or Chris. It's about policy. And one thing I will say for my own party, and I think this is a fair, it's a fair comment. If you look at the 3 years before we were in government, actually the 6 years, the ACT Party was always there putting out a huge amount of paper, whether it was Resource Management Act's reforms, that are now being implemented, our education policies around charter schools that we just talked about, the idea of 3 strikes in law and order, the idea of the Treaty Principles Bill. I mean, we came to government as a party that had done a huge amount of work in order to have policies to put in place. So I think, probably more than people like to make politics about this politician and that politician, I always just say, look, really it's about the policies. And I think when it comes to policy, we can really point to having come with our homework done and that's allowing us to influence what sort of policies the government puts in place.
Certainly. Hey, look, let's just reflect on perhaps some lowlights. In terms of what I mean by that is obviously what comes to mind is the Treaty Principles Bill. Any regrets from you on the way in which it all transpired this year? Obviously, it led to that massive hikoi.
God, no. I mean, up and down New Zealand now, people are talking about the treaty and what it really means in a way I don't think we've seen before. And I think it's long overdue. I think the most interesting thing is how much opposition there is to the bill, even from people who say that they don't believe it will pass. And the reason I find that interesting, why would you oppose a bill that you are certain is not going to pass? Well, because you don't want people to talk about it, but people are talking about it. And that's the real achievement here. So no, I have no regrets about that. I think the behaviour of Te Pāti Māori, they've now been referred to the Privileges Committee by the Speaker in Parliament for their performance. I won't even call it a haka. But, trying to interrupt parliamentarians casting votes on behalf of the people and trying to get in people's faces and intimidate them. It might go well on TikTok, but at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, what are these people really achieving? They're not increasing understanding. They're not putting forward new ideas. They're just trying to stop other people having a say. And I don't think that will ultimately end well for them, because I think in the Māori world, people are going to look at Te Pāti Māori and say, well, yeah, it's kind of funny, but do these guys actually have any solutions for us and our children? And the answer, as far as I can tell, is no.
Look, I asked Luxon the same question last week in terms of he had any regrets. I mean, one that sprung to mind to him was could have done better when it came to the cancer drug funding situation. I'm going to throw you a bone here. In terms of, is there anything you look back at this year and you're like, jeepers, we could have handled that better?
There's got to be, but at this point, I'm just trying to get through the year. I mean, the cancer drug situation. I was responsible for that. I think the problem was that a lot of people heard the National Party policy before the election, and it really wasn't possible to implement the policy the way they talked about it. I don't think that it was a particularly smart promise to make. But in the end, we actually got a win-win-win. So we managed to get the drugs they promised funded. We managed to preserve the integrity of the Pharmac system, so we didn't do something that would undermine the whole system by just selecting certain drugs. And as a result of that, we're actually funding a lot more medicines that nobody had planned to fund because we couldn't pick specific ones, so we had to fund Pharmac to fund more. So look, I can see how he might see that as a negative, but actually, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I think it turned that into a win-win-win. So long as the government's able to save money elsewhere to pay for it, then we've actually funded more medicine through Pharmac than ever before.
Sure. Hey, look, let's end on a slightly positive note. Have you got plans for the holidays in preparation for you eventually becoming Deputy Prime Minister?
Look, to be honest, I know so many people who had a bloody tough year, and I've been lucky in that I've had my job and I haven't been, running out of money. A lot of businesses are going into the summer with a lot of anxiety. I haven't had all of that, but I have had a bloody busy year. And to be honest, I haven't really thought much about what happens next week. I'm just going to get through this week and get everything ticked off, and then we can think about what happens next year.
Oh, well, good on you. Hey, look, I've asked every politician that's come on for their final year in review, just for your Christmas song of the year. Come on, give it to us, David.
Oh, Jesus. That's a worry. I'm worried I'm going to say Snoopy. Yes, Snoopy. I mean, I know it's probably a controversial choice, but it does have something going for it.
Oh, well, there we go. That is David Seymour, ACT Party leader. Thank you very much for being present for our community throughout the year as well. Really appreciated talking with you, and hopefully do it again next year as well. You have a good holiday when you get to
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Anytime, William. You have a great day.